Okay, compare the film from the 1950s and 1960s to now.
Well, the films back in the 1950s and 60s, that was just coming out of the era of black and white into color in the real early 50s. And the films were nowhere near as technical as they are now because they didn't have the ability to do all of the technical things they can do now with computers and stuff like that. So in a lot of ways, the films were probably a lot more. I don't want to say crude, but they were not nearly as slick in that as what they are today. So I think acting became much more important then because they shot it all on film, not digital. So it was all on film, so they had to shoot the film over and over again, and they had to cut and splice film to get it all back together. So what you had, the films then were, I think the actors in a lot of ways were better because they had to do it, and they had to do it kind of live, where now you can do it digitally and they can do it over and over and over again, erase it until they get it exactly where they want it. So you go way back there and you're talking about people like Humphrey Bogart and John Wayne. These guys were all actors that had been around. Most of them had also been around for many, many, many years. And instead of coming up quick like they do now, these guys had been around for so many years and been into show business and of all kinds of show business that I think the actors were probably a little bit better at acting, but the performances were probably not as good as they are now because they couldn't fix them up and do the things they can do with them now.
Okay, compare the style in the 1960s to now in the 1950s and how would people dress?
You're talking about clothes?
Yes.
Well, in the really early 1950s, when I was in high school, I came out of high school in 1951, we were dressed in a style that you guys would probably consider formal by today's standards, because when I went to school in high school, we wore slacks, real nice slacks, pressed, matched belts, very nice shirts. We always wore shirts, usually with the upper collar buttoned, and we matched everything perfectly. It would have just been unheard of to wear Levi's to school, or shorts, or anything like that. So we were much more formal. But that got better as time wore on. That was the very early 50s. As time wore on, styles became more relaxed, but they still didn't get to things like Levi's and that until well into the 60s, maybe after that. We were shirts and slacks, shined our shoes, things that you guys don't do.
Okay, what were some of your favorite TV shows when you were younger compared to the ones today and how they've changed?
Well, again, I'm going back to the TV shows when we were younger. Most of them were performed by guys that had been in the business for many, many, many years. I'm talking about guys like, the real early 50s and the early years of television. You're talking about guys like Milton Berle, Ed Sullivan Show, some of these guys, and they were very early. But these guys have had, and Jack Benny, somebody like that, these guys had had 30 and 40 years in show business, vaudeville and that sort of thing. So they were really, really, truly professionals. Most of that stuff was also shot live. So you had also watched it live. So they had to be very, very careful with what they said. They were very, very careful what they said because they couldn't edit it. It was watched live. I think compared to today, I think they were much, much better because they had this huge experience, years and years of experience, of stage work, and they'd been in Broadway shows and stuff like that, and they were highly, highly trained people. And it was just, I think compared to now, I think the content of the shows now that I see, a lot of them I see, I don't watch them, but that I see put on the TV are very poorly written. They're very thin. And back there, the writers worked very hard to get everything right. I think now is very thin. It's almost kind of, I see one show after another that's almost a copy. It's silly.
Can you talk about a little bit like about the segregation and gender roles and how those have changed from the films? Say West Side Story or Hair.
Oh, sure. Way back then, segregation was still a big deal. The blacks were seldom seen on television, particularly in the early 50s, except in parts like Jack Benny when he had a guy that was kind of a valet named Rochester. And so they kind of mocked the races at that time. Particularly the blacks, they were seldom ever seen on television, nor were many races. It was really it was a white medium, and they really stuck to that. Seldom ever did they go out of that.
Thank you.